The Oklahoma City Thunder got absolutely demolished by the San Antonio Spurs last night, 130 to 110. And this wasn't just any loss, this was the Thunder's second beatdown by the Spurs in less than 3 weeks. The same Spurs who already knocked them out of the Emirates Cup. The same Spurs who are now 2-0 against the team that started 24-1 and is supposed to be the best offensive squad in NBA history. The Thunder gave up 57% shooting from the field. They got outscored 43-28 in the fourth quarter alone. And here's the kicker. Victor Wembanyama played only half the game off the bench, scored just 12 points, and the Spurs still dominated. That's not a fluke. That's not a bad night. That's a problem. And we need to talk about what's happening here because the Spurs might actually own these Thunder. Let's start with what actually happened last night in San Antonio. The game was close through 3 quarters, competitive, back and forth. The Thunder were hanging around doing Thunder things, and then the fourth quarter hit and everything fell apart. The Spurs dropped 43 points in the final period, 43 against the league's best defense. Against the defense that's supposed to be historically great, the Thunder could only muster 28 in response. That's a 15-point quarter differential that turned a competitive game into a blowout. San Antonio shot 57% from the field for the entire game. Let me repeat that number because it's genuinely shocking when you consider who they were playing against. 57%. The Oklahoma City Thunder came into this season being compared to the all-time great defenses. They've been suffocating teams all year, and the Spurs just carved them up like it was nothing. And remember, this wasn't even the Spurs at full strength. Wembanyama came off the bench. He played 23 minutes. He had 12 points and 5 rebounds. In the fourth quarter, when the Spurs did all their damage, Wemby had 3 points in 3 minutes. This wasn't a Victor Wembanyama takeover game. This was the Spurs as a team systematically destroying what's supposed to be the best team in the league. Here's what makes this so concerning for Oklahoma City. This is now a pattern. 2 weeks ago, the Spurs shocked everyone by knocking the Thunder out of the Emirates Cup in the semifinals. That was supposed to be the Thunder's tournament to lose. They were the favorites, they were rolling, and the Spurs came in and ended their run. At the time, people wrote it off. It was a fluke. It was a one-game thing. The Thunder would get revenge when they played again. Well, they got their chance for revenge last night, and it went even worse. This wasn't a close game that came down to the wire. This was a 20-point beatdown where the Spurs looked like the better team for the entire fourth quarter. So now the Thunder are 0-2 against San Antonio this season, and this is after starting the year 24-1, after looking like they might actually break the Warriors' 73-win record, after establishing themselves as the clear title favorites in the West. The one team that has consistently figured them out is the San Antonio Spurs. Now let's talk about the Victor Wembanyama situation because this makes the whole thing even more fascinating. Wemby has only played in 17 of the Spurs' 29 games this season. He's only started 12 of those games, and the Spurs are 22-7 overall. They're 9-3 in games where Wembanyama doesn't play at all. Since Wembanyama got hurt back on November 12th when the Spurs were 8-4, he's either missed games completely or played limited minutes off the bench. That's 17 straight games now where he's been either out or severely limited. And over that span, the Spurs are 14-3. I'm not saying the Spurs are better without Victor Wembanyama. That would be ridiculous. But what I am saying is that the Spurs are an elite, incredibly deep, brilliantly constructed team that can win at a high level, even when their franchise player isn't available or isn't at full strength. And that depth, that system, that coaching, it's causing massive problems for the Thunder specifically. The Spurs are built in a way where they can match up with Oklahoma City's length and athleticism. They can handle the Thunder's defensive pressure. They can execute in the half court when games slow down, and they don't need Wemby to dominate for 35 minutes to do it. That's a scary proposition for every team in the West, but especially for OKC. Remember all that talk about the Thunder chasing 74 or 75 wins? Remember when they were pacing to win 78 or 79 games and break the Warriors' all-time record? Well, that's officially over. The Thunder started the season 24-1. They looked unstoppable, but they've now lost 3 of their last 5 games, 2 to the Spurs, 1 to Minnesota, and with this latest slump, they've fallen behind the pace of the 2015-16 Warriors. They're now on track to win 71 games, which would actually be below the 72-10 Bulls record from 1995 to 96. Now look, winning 71 games would still be incredible. That's still a historically great season. But the point is that the early season dominance has cooled off. The schedule has gotten harder. They're playing actual contenders now instead of the cupcake opponents they feasted on early. And the results are showing that this team isn't invincible. Thunder got a little fat on their early schedule. They beat up on bad teams and looked like world beaters doing it. Now they're in the meat of the season facing playoff caliber opponents, and they're discovering they have some real vulnerabilities. The Spurs have exposed those vulnerabilities twice now. Let's address the elephant in the room. The Thunder's defense isn't as historically great as everyone thought it was. Yes, they're the best defensive team in the league by the numbers. Yes, they have elite length and athleticism and versatility, but giving up 57% shooting and 130 points to a Spurs team playing without their best player at full strength, that's a problem. Historic defenses don't get picked apart like that. The 2004 Pistons didn't give up 43-point quarters. The 2008 Celtics didn't let teams shoot 57% from the field. And those teams faced elite offensive attacks in their eras. The Thunder are getting cooked by a well-coached team with good ball movement, and that's concerning. The Spurs are finding something in the way they attack Oklahoma City. Maybe it's how they move the ball. Maybe it's the specific lineups they're using. Maybe it's just execution and confidence. But whatever it is, it's working. And if the Spurs can figure it out, other teams will study that tape and try to replicate it. This is what happens when you play elite competition. The flaws get exposed. The weaknesses show up. And right now, the Thunder's biggest weakness is that they can't seem to figure out how to stop a well-oiled offensive system when that system is executing at a high level. But the Spurs, they're 9-3 without Wembanyama. They're beating the best teams in the league without him, and that speaks to how Greg Popovich and that front office have built this roster. They have depth at every position. They have multiple guys who can create offense. They have a defensive system that works regardless of personnel. The Thunder are elite, no question, but the Spurs are constructed in a way that specifically gives OKC problems, and when you add a healthy Victor Wembanyama into that mix, things get even scarier. So here's where things get really interesting. The Thunder and Spurs play again Christmas Day in Oklahoma City, 2:30 Eastern, and the stakes are massive. If the Thunder lose that game, we might need to seriously reconsider who the title favorites are in the West. Going 0-3 against a single team in the regular season isn't just embarrassing. It's a massive red flag. It suggests a fundamental matchup problem that could come back to haunt you in the playoffs. The odds makers have installed OKC as 9.5-point favorites for that game. That's a big number for a team that's lost twice already to this opponent. But the Thunder are at home, and they're going to be desperate to prove that the first two games were flukes. They need to send a message. They need to show that they can solve this puzzle. But if the Spurs come into their building on Christmas Day and win again, that's 3 straight. That's a statement. That's the Spurs officially owning the Thunder, and that completely flips the narrative in the Western Conference. Let's zoom out for a second and look at what this means for the rest of the season. The Thunder are still 27-4. They're still in first place in the West. They're still one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the league. None of that changes because of 2 losses to San Antonio. But what does change is the perception of invincibility. The Thunder looked unstoppable for the first month and a half of the season. They looked like they were going to steamroll everyone on their way to 75 wins and a championship. That narrative is over now. The Spurs have given every other team in the league a blueprint for how to attack Oklahoma City. Move the ball, execute your offense, don't get sped up by their length and pressure, trust your system, and when you get to the fourth quarter, impose your will. That's exactly what San Antonio did last night. They stayed patient through 3 quarters, and then they crushed the Thunder when it mattered most. That's championship-level execution. That's the kind of thing that wins playoff series. And here's the scary part for the rest of the league. The Spurs are only going to get better as the season goes on. Wembanyama is eventually going to be fully healthy and back in the starting lineup playing 35 minutes a night. When that happens, this team goes from being really good to potentially elite, and they already have OKC's number. So what do the Thunder do now? How do they fix this? Because make no mistake, this is a problem that needs fixing before the playoffs arrive. First, they need to figure out their defensive rotations against San Antonio's ball movement. Something isn't working. Whether it's personnel, scheme, or execution, they're giving up way too many clean looks. 57% shooting means guys are getting open shots, and that can't happen. Second, they need to show up with desperation today on Christmas. This isn't just another regular season game. This is about pride. This is about proving they're still the best team in the West. They need to come out aggressive from the opening tip and never let up. And third, they need to remember that the regular season is about learning and improving. Yes, these losses hurt. Yes, going 0-2 against the Spurs looks bad, but if they can figure out what San Antonio is doing and make adjustments, they'll be better prepared if they meet in the playoffs. So what do you think? Are the Spurs legitimately the Thunder's kryptonite? Or will OKC figure it out on Christmas Day? Can the Thunder still win 70-plus games, or has that window closed? Drop your predictions in the comments below, and if you want more NBA analysis like this, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any future breakdowns. I'll see you in the next one.